we're going to have to do a thing that I hear about basically every other podcast.
Yeah.
They introduce who they are as they start.
Okay.
So like, you're with Jason and Cody for Fringe Frequencies. I don't know. Even just as simple as last one. So it's like, before jumping right into it, we have to say, you're with Jason and I'm Cody.
Okay.
And this is Mr. Squiggle,
G'day, mate. This is Jason Cody. Jason Cody got a durry.
No.
All right.
We do enjoy a bit of humour and a bit of fun.
All right. Okay.
But this is a very serious topic. Please introduce us, Jace.
All right. So you want me to introduce our podcast first?
Please do.
You're with Jason and Cody on the Fringe Frequencies podcast.
Thank you very much.
Passover 2023.
Yeah, well, it is.
There we go. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
And welcome to Cody.
We basically discussed, like, very loosely the structure of how things were going to go. And something we've landed on, I think, which is important to point out, is the subjects. So, Jason, yours was KJV onlyism, or the King James discussion we have with Pastor Eddie, and then it's going to be mine, and then it's going to go back to you, and then it's going to go back to me.
Bit of back and forth. Yeah,
bit of back and forth. So I've chosen one of some true substance here.
That's right. It kind of took me back this one actually.
Well, it actually took me back when you said the King James discussion. I was surprised. I was surprised it was something you brought up, and so I thought, well, I've got to match him. I've got to bring something to the table that isn't conventional or perceived conventional from Cody's perspective. And it is the theory of the hollow moon, a theory that was popularized, I would say, probably as early as the 80s, even possibly even earlier.
I believe the original goes back to the late 17th century, but it's popularized in 1911.
Well,
H.G. Wells.
Yeah, really?
Mm.
Yeah, okay. Well, this would be more specifically, as I would.
The First Men in the Moon, H.G. Wells, 1901.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm coming at it from the alien spaceship position, and I don't know if H.G. Wells popularized that.
Because who doesn't like aliens?
H.G. Wells. I'm pretty sure he was the one who said, "If there is no God, nothing matters, but if there is a God, nothing else matters." I'm pretty sure he is. I got to check that.
You have to check that.
But yeah, so I'll give a bit of backstory to it. During my what I would call my conspiracy theory days, my genuine tinfoil hat days, I was looking for a lot of answers.
You haven't changed?
Well, this is the thing. I found the answers now. So the tinfoil hat's still there, but I've just found the answers. And for those of you who don't know this, the answer is always the truth. That we're all looking for the same thing.
Can you give us an idea of before you obviously became a Christian, your early days? Are you willing to share that? With regards to this topic and
look,
just out of curiosity. For those readers, for any listeners today who maybe are in that boat, or people that have come out of that and realised and have actually got the answers for truth.
So it would more veer into my testimony, really. Like, it would really be my testimony if I was to go into the depths of it. But as a snapshot of this period of time in my life, I was a child of the night. I just wasn't awake during the day. I was consuming copious amounts of different substances to try to keep myself numb.
McDonald's and KFC, yeah.
On top of McDonald's and KFC, man, I was a big instant noodles fiend. Like, I think my dad came into I was living in a bungalow, and it was at the back of my family home, my actual childhood home, and my dad came in once, and he's like, "Son, what are all these bottles of water around? Like, why is there so many bottles of water?" And I'm like, "Oh, I use bottled water and boil it for my noodles," and he's like, "What do you mean?" Like, well, but I'm saying, like, literally, like, there was probably about 30 bottles of water lying around, and
why didn't you use the water from the tap?
Oh man, it was evil. It was evil water. I wouldn't drink the evil water. No, but no, like, whether it was the fluoride or the chlorine, like, so this was a snapshot of the type of person. Like, if you opened that bungalow door and looked at me, you'd be like, this guy is just cooked. This guy's done. Like, and I was.
And that fluoride's going to get you a chakra.
Well, look, my inner eye, my third eye, was definitely blinded by it. So so no. But in all seriousness, I was seeking truth, but it was as long as it wasn't from the Bible, basically.
Yeah.
You know,
What did you know? What did you know of the Bible?
very little, very little. I knew that the Bible was full of, or at least from this perspective, full of allegory. It was just full of stories.
But you hadn't read it.
No, not only had I not read it, but the only exposure I had to the Bible at that point was the NIV. So Dad did sporadically attend churches. He sent us to churches as we grew up. By this period of time, between 19, 20, 21, the church was nowhere in my life. God was nowhere in my life with regards to my focus.
Did you say 1920, 1921?
Between 19 and 20, but when I was
Oh,
19
sorry,
and 20.
yeah, gotcha, yeah.
Well,
I don't think you were that old.
we wouldn't have been in school together, that's for sure. Yeah. But the reality.
The 1920s.
What was it like when the car came out, bro? Were you surprised?
The car?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
When
back in the day?
when Ford bought out his Model T, were you like, wow, but I'll never give up on old Hoofy over there, my faithful horse.
Yeah, I know. It's the beard, isn't it?
It is the beard.
It's the beard?
The beard that I want, I really want to check this out. H.G. Wells quote. God.
Go for gold. Just while we're on that topic today, just for all those listeners out there today, you'll probably notice there's a lovely little menorah here on the table here. So for some of us weirdos Christians, we do Passover as a remembrance of God taking his people out of Egypt. We don't put that little blood on the lintel anymore. Right? That's gone. That's something to do with Jesus. But
Jesus is the Passover, bro.
We don't. Oh no, he is 100%. He 100%. But we still. These honestly, these pagan practices of Christmas and Easter. I mean,
I know
you heathens,
and I have no
issue
acknowledging Passover, bro. No issue. I think of all the things we acknowledge throughout these days,
you're supposed to react to that.
Oh, I mean, bro. Well, take your pagan idol off this table, all right? Halloween. I love Halloween. I love getting dressed up and walking around at night. Pretending to be dark evil spirits. You know. I mean, that's a mainstay for my family. I'm just kidding. This is satirical.
Giving the kids tricks.
Something we'll get into later, which will be interesting, is what denotes Passover. How do we know it's Passover? Because there are some people that believe it is an astrological thing.
Big time. I think what they call astrotheology is a big part of. Past and not present, but early Jewish writings. I mean, look at the star, obviously that guided the
Magus, Magi.
Guided the Magi. I mean, that's astronomy. It's not astrology. It's astronomy.
Yeah. So
God works through the luminaries. He works through the stars. There are signs that they're given for signs and for seasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not for magical stuff and.
Well, anyway. Getting on to this quick subject. So I'm 20. I'm sitting in my room. I'm trying to decide. Okay, what are the evidences of alien interactions with human beings? I was big into the UFO stuff. I was really particularly big into. I don't know what the universal word is to describe the Anunnaki and to describe the things. But okay, so this is interesting. I knew more about the Book of Enoch than I did about the actual Bible. So so it was very interesting. And I came across this hollow moon theory. And of course, I'd also dabbled into the hollow earth theory. And yeah, there was something in there because with regards to the hollow earth theory, it didn't hook in as much, but there was genuine scientific reasons why the moon didn't make sense, why there was no universal theory to explain how the moon's origins, not only its origin, but what we observe about it today. So yeah, that's what I want to delve into. I want to delve into the idea that.
So what you're saying is, I love that saying. What you're saying is, gotcha. You gave up all this
lobsters.
Yeah, lobsters. Yeah. So what you're saying is you gave up all that alien conspiracy stuff, but you kept hollow moon theory and aliens coming in and out of the moon, or
no? So I
because if you kept that part, that would add to our discussion today.
No, I didn't keep it. What? So by the time I became a born again Christian, by that time I'd basically forsaken everything I had understood about the world because I knew I was wrong, or there was a high degree of certainty that I was wrong about most of the things that I knew, and that God would know better. which turns out is the truth. But something that always stayed with me was this idea that the most renowned scientists in the world, whether they be astrobiologists, whether they be I always mix them up. Cosmologists.
Not cosmetologists.
Yeah, not cosmetologists. Yeah, that one.
Not the one that works on our faces,
They have to basically like perform mental gymnastics to try to explain to people how the moon came about naturalistically and randomly. It just doesn't make sense. And there's a few things in our world that really don't have a clear answer. I understand that.
Like flat Earth?
Man, you were so ready to jump on that. Like I was waiting for this obvious example where you could reasonably interject with a flat Earth idea, and you just jumped in like that. You're like, the first example.
Just for the record, we're not touching on any of that sort of topic today. Yeah. That's and no one in here nobody in this room is a proponent of flat Earth or not a proponent of flat Earth. So I honestly can't get high enough to figure it out. So anyway, back to yours.
I'll be honest. One of the big things about the moon that always surprised me was the information about the moon landings. Was the information that specifically NASA had released about the moon, and most importantly, the information that they omitted. Sorry about that. I'll just mute this. So there was so much information omitted from the moon landings and the lunar walks. Even things like losing moon rocks. They actually lost moon rocks. You
mean from all their composite images that they provide, and all of a sudden they look different, and there's no explanation for it?
No. Literally the physical artifacts, the artifacts that they brought. Some of them were lost. Like I don't know how you lose those.
Oh, you mean the ones they brought back?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the most interesting things was that the original footage that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin took from their first moonwalk has been lost. Did you know that?
Yes.
Yeah. That makes no sense, And I've heard explanations for that. I've heard things like, well, NASA moved offices. They moved from this office to that office, and it just got lost. It's like,
so you're kind of opening up another paradigm here, which it's obviously some of the listeners are going to go, so you guys are talking about the fact that we didn't get to the moon. Well, I don't think most of us want to go, hey, fantastic, we went to the moon in the 60s and 70s, great. Can you show us non-composite images of Earth? Can you show us some of the artifacts and stop having these convenient things happen where all these things disappear? I think either it's deliberate, in which case it's just for clickbait so that everybody starts doubting it so there's something to hide, or there is actually just something to hide and you didn't actually go there in the first place. So it's got to be one or the other. It's either, it's got to be, so that's the thing. These things that are going missing.
So for me, the moon landings was a big journey. I found that my position originally was that we absolutely did not go to the moon. There were several reasons why I believed that. They had, not only is it composite images, so pretty much everything you see is a composite image when it comes to celestial bodies.
Can you explain what a composite image is?
An image, a photoshopped image. So an image, the most layman way to explain it is that NASA is taking photos, or other space agencies, they're taking photos, but then altering those photos to make it palatable for the public. That's their explanation. So a composite image is to put it in layman's term, an image that has been altered. So every single image you see produced by a space agency is altered in some way. So when it comes to composite images, everything is a composite image that you see in space. There's a specific image that won, it was like image of the century or something. It was the Earth shot from the Voyager space.
Another one.
Basically, that is a composite image.
Isn't it the one they use? I've seen in churches many times when they're rightfully, they have the right intentions. They're talking about that. How the secular world says that the world's not significant, we're not significant, we're just one ball going through the solar system in space and the universe. Yeah. And I think Louis Giglio actually used it, I think, on one of his sermon, you could say tours or whatever, and through America, and have that image of the Voyager, and you could see the
It's
Earth as a
the
little
blue
dot.
marble. I think it's called the
Little blue marble, yeah. So you've got good intentions, as in we're not insignificant, but it's like, sure, but how the heck did you get that photo? Like,
well, whether or not, so something that I found very interesting during my study was that a lot of this is actually data. A lot of it is actually data. So when it comes to
zeros and ones,
exactly, yeah,
binary.
Well, I think it was Saturn. I think Saturn is a completely made up image, based on their compositional readings and things like that. So, this gives credence to this idea that NASA and other space agencies haven't been upfront about what they're presenting to the public.
We should just on that topic, we should actually just introduce to the wider public. So I'm just going to bring this up onto my computer here. Most of our listeners won't know this. So the original head of NASA was a Nazi scientist.
Oh, von Braun.
That's right.
He made the Saturn V.
Yep. So the original Werner von Braun, 1912 to 1977. So the original head of NASA was a Nazi scientist, a complicit Nazi scientist. And that's essentially how that all started. So for a start, for anyone that's interested in facts rather than fiction, that should be alarm bells for a start. So it comes back to this idea. Sorry to interject here. It comes back to this idea that, if you cannot trust the source, I mean, every day as human beings, we make friends and we make decisions a lot based on trust. And also not just based on the information, but the source of that information, is a source of that information trustworthy? So obviously Operation Paperclip, which we're both familiar with, which is, approximately, I think, a certain number of more than 10,000 Nazi scientists.
I don't think it was 10,000.
It was a lot. So it was the vast majority of them went to the United States, and the rest went to the Soviet Union. And Werner von Braun was the head of NASA. So when you start an organization at that level, we're not going to get into the moral implications of using Nazi scientists because everyone was trying to get their heads up here. But when you start at that level, we already have question marks. So going back to obviously what you're discussing with regards to composite images and obfuscation, I mean it all ties in quite well. It's like, I just wanted to add that point.
A good again, not specific about this analogy. A good analogy for composite images is like the Bible. When you have people who are creating images of what Ezekiel saw, the wheels within wheels, the eyes all about them, the angels that are created with these text descriptions. What is being put out is an interpretation of the data.
But that's not how it's presented.
No, it's being presented as this is what this looks like if you were to look at it with the naked eye, and that's just not true. Even stars are not. If you were to take a very powerful if you were to take a powerful telescope and look at it, look at the stars, they actually have a very interesting ripple effect, as if, and it's been described, and I haven't personally seen this.
They look like one of those globes, those globes that you touch, and all the what are those?
The plasma globes.
Plasma globes.
Yeah.
You touch them, and all the stuff comes out. They kind of look like they're encased in a ball, but they're a lot blurrier.
The explanation I've been told is that it's like you're looking through water. You're looking through water and seeing the stars through water. And yet when we see every shot of a star, they're very clear and defined, and that is a composite image. It's designed to be viewed as if you're looking at it from space with the naked eye. And that's just we simply can't do that. We don't have that technology. We don't have that ability. So who knows? And something that gives credence to the flat Earth is this distrust people have in the institutions that provide us these informations. Something that's often said. It's like, do you think all of the space agencies around the world are all working together to hide this information?
That's how pyramids work.
It's like well, when you think about it, they're all using composite images. Like none of them are presenting us with data that we can try to interpret ourselves.
That by the way, that jar is going to be, it's me here. Jar is going to be so full next week, Kara.
So we'll actually have a counter by the end of the podcast, and we'll announce it
next week.
Yeah,
we'll see who won. We should actually have a prize. I want to encourage you. Hey, just on that. So it's interesting in Genesis 1:16, God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. So we'll just say sun and moon for that. He also made the stars. So this is
Bro, he made the stars also.
Yeah.
He made the stars also.
Yeah.
Use the Bible. So
this is what it says.
What does it say?
He also made the stars.
No, he made the stars also, is what the Bible says.
Yeah, okay. We're going back to last week with the KJV. Yeah.
So it says, and this is something I wanted to touch on. Sorry to interject. This is my subject.
No. So it's 15. Going back to 15. Let them be light, and let them. So it's
let
them
me
be
read
lights
it.
in the
You
read it.
Let me read it from the Bible.
Oh, you read
okay?
it. Go.
And
I
let
didn't
them
even know
be
you were
for
gonna bring it
lights.
up, by the way. Yeah.
Well, I sent it in my notes.
I'm not reading it yet.
Yeah. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also.
So there seems to be a separation between some luminaries, lights in the sky, and a separation between that and stars.
Absolutely.
But we don't actually know what that means.
Well, something that I think is very interesting in Scripture is it consistently says that the moon rules the night as the night light of the night. You know. And the start of that is in verse 14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years."
Don't you love that word firmament?
Yeah, it throws a lot of people off. You know, so firmament is basically the medium, right? So the firmament of heaven is basically the sky. You know, it's basically what we would perceive as a sky, but it's a medium that it is in. So these lights are in the firmament, you know, which is to say they're in this medium, this void, you know.
That's one interpretation, but we don't need to go down that rabbit trail today.
Well, that's why we run into issues with the water canopy theory, you know. But that's a whole nother thing. I'd love to do a pre-diluvian podcast. I'd love to.
Yeah, I think we will. These are anyway.
But getting
back to your experience coming out of, I guess some of the more conspiracy theory type ideas of the moon and aliens, all that sort of stuff, and now you're a Christian. Can you just describe us, you know, with regards to, I guess, because I up until last week, I knew about the whole hollow Earth theory, and I haven't looked into it, and I haven't bothered. It doesn't interest me that much at this point in my life. Although it was something we could bring up because there's a whole lot of information about it. But with this particular one, hollow moon, what made you sort of hold on to it?
So it's
as
more
a theory.
I say hollow moon, but what I'm referring to is the moon spaceship theory. So this idea that if there was an intelligence that had the technological ability to create a spaceship that could be used to there's this theory called panspermia, right, which basically means aliens seeded the earth with life, and that's an origin story. I think Richard Dawkins holds to it. A few doesn't hold to it, but suggests.
Gosh, Richard Dawkins holds that. That's interesting.
Oh man, well, he doesn't hold to it. He has suggested it. Someone held up an arm, and I said, when it comes to why has this been with me even up into my Christianity is simply because the moon doesn't make sense. There's issues with the moon. So I'll read out some things here that give credence. So this is a secular look at some of the interesting aspects of the moon. So its size. So I'll quickly summarize them. I'll read these and then quickly summarize them as to how I interpret it. So size, the moon is the fifth largest moon in the solar system, and it is particularly large relative to the size of its parent planet, Earth. It is approximately 1/4 the size of Earth, which is much larger than other moons in the solar system relative to their planets. So when it comes to how, what do we have to compare to? You know, do we have other celestial bodies, specifically satellites, which moons are? Moons are celestial satellites for the planets. What's the likelihood that we can find one like the moon? And it's zero. There are none. There are none that are like the moon. Like, not only does it not make sense, not only does the size not make sense, the size of the moon itself relative to our planet, but the size of the moon and being a solo celestial moon. So where we have other large celestial moons, like with
Saturn.
Saturn. The Jovian moons, so Jupiter's moons, they're huge. Some of them are huge, and then other ones are small. Where we find planets that only have a few moons, they're always small moons. So the planets that have large moons always have accompanying small moons. None of them have a moon as big as our moon relative to the planet. So that comes into an issue with regards to the capture theory, the gravity capture theory, which I'll get into later. So the moon's orbit is almost perfectly circular, with an average distance of about 238,000 miles or 348,000 kilometers from Earth. It's located at the precise distance from Earth, which allows it to appear the same size as the sun during solar eclipses. So what does that mean? I mean, it means that the sun is 400 times bigger than the moon, and the moon is 400 times closer than the sun. So the types of calculations to figure out the statistics behind the likelihood that this would come about randomly are astronomical. So to the point where it's not reasonable to suggest this is by chance. Pastor Eddie often does this thing where he talks about, you were there when he goes into his coins.
It was last week.
5-cent pieces. There is a point in so that statisticians will acknowledge that something is statistically impossible. And the chance that the moon simply got caught in the Earth's gravity well.
So unlike Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber, where he asks, there's a 1 in a million chance that you go out with me.
So there's still a chance?
Yeah.
And I wanted to say that from the church. I wanted to say that. And then he was like, 10 to the 10th power of the 127th power. I'm like, so there's a chance. So no, statisticians will say, no, there's no chance. This does not actually exist. When it comes to what we interpret mathematically as impossible, this fits that. The idea, and that this is specifically gravity capture theory, the idea that the Earth was a lone, it wasn't a rogue planet. It still had the sun, but it was a lone planet. It had been fully formed, and the moon fell into its gravity well and just started circling around it. Ridiculous. It's a ridiculous.
Regardless of all the other things that have to come into play as well.
Well, that's the thing we talked about at church. We talked about the other conditions, so the other things that had to be in place as well.
And they all have to converge.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to multiply them together. You don't just add on the chances, you multiply the chances together. So yeah, I think that was the condition of life.
Mathematics and stats, it can be so inconvenient at times.
Especially for a secular worldview. So the rotation, so the moon's rotation, so this is just 2 points. So the size doesn't make sense. Its orbit doesn't make sense. The rotation, so the moon's rotation is synchronous, meaning that it takes the same amount of time to complete one rotation as it does to orbit the Earth. This results in only one side of the moon being visible from Earth at any one time. So what that means is, if that's not clear in a layman's term, there is a dark side of the moon that never faces the Earth, right? So it's spinning at the exact speed it needs to, so that one side faces the Earth at any given time. This becomes a problem for what they call the mass impact theory, or the I can't remember what it's called, the great impact theory. The idea that there was a Mars-sized celestial body that impacted the proto-Earth, this Earth that was much larger and very different from what we see today. So this Mars-like body hit the Earth, and then there was this sort of liquefaction going on with regards to the mantles melting, and they all swirled around each other until we have this moon and this Earth as we see it today. The reason it's a problem is because of the conservation of angular momentum. So if you have a celestial body hitting the Earth at a particular speed, then the two of them are going to synchronize at some point with regards to their rotational speeds, because you can't have these two things meet, or at least, again, the statistics that one would spin at this speed and the other would spin at that speed after a great impact is ridiculous. Like, it's so ridiculous that the great impact theory doesn't work unless you have a second impact to the moon, which has been sort of colloquially known as the big double whack theory. So there was the first whack where this Mars-sized body hit the Earth. Then they started swirling around, and then after they had formed two homogeneous spheres, another another celestial body hit the
mean,
moon to slow it down.
Just think about something as simple as a rubbish tip. I mean, the amount of stuff that people just throw away every single day, and you come back in 1,000 years, and it's been thrown in a certain way. The big graders have come in and moved it and twisted it around over 1,000 years. What is the possibility that anything in that junk pile, and there's a lot of things there, would turn into anything? I mean, just that idea. Let's just put God out of the picture for a second and just talk about that one idea with what we all know from science. If we're just throwing things in a big pile, let alone some sort of comet impact theory that obviously caused all these series of events that made the moon into what it is today, just on a simple level, on day to day, somebody would look at you like you got two heads. What are you talking about? Well, the rubbish pile can turn into a house. A house might be built out of that. Just turn up because the timber just magically fell in the right place, and it is similar. It's on a grander scale, but it's. Yeah.
There's two. I cannot remember the sources, but there are secular individuals who have talked about. There's one in particular. I can't remember who he is, but he talks about there being a pile of rubbish. He says, if we were to look at the Big Bang Theory, the types of chances we're talking about is having all of the components for a 747 jet lying on a tarmac, and a great wind comes through, a storm comes through, blows it all around, and then when it leaves, there's a fully built, ready to go 747. He's like, these are the kind of chances we're talking about. Another one is, an interesting one that talks about the DNA information theory. So these are all obviously theories of intelligent design. The idea that we're juxtaposing random undirected chances or random undirected forces as opposed to directed hand of God guiding things. Sorry.
No.
Put a bomb in a paint shop and you blow it up, and after the explosion, you look on a nearby wall and it's written, Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. You blow up the ink factory, and after you look at the debris, you can find a completely written Bible. From random chances. So these are the types of things we're dealing with, when it comes to, okay, what is reasonable? What is reasonable? So far, we've got the size, the orbit, the rotation of the moon not making sense with regards to what we naturally observe in the world and what we would expect to have observed from a random naturalistic worldview. So we have composition. So, it keeps going. So size, orbit, rotation, composition, craters, tidal locking, magnetic field, volcanism, and lack of plate tectonics. So all of these have implications that they're just simply not random.
Just go back to your that picture that you painted for us of a 747 parts laying across a tarmac and a big, let's say a whirlwind coming through and putting it all back together lovely into a 747. It actually goes against entropy. It's completely opposite to what we know, which is things degrade. They actually go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, thermodynamics.
Yeah,
goes against the second law.
So it's completely nonsensical anyway, just from a purely scientific perspective. That I don't have to add God of the people say, God of the gaps. You have to introduce God of the gaps. It's like, no, I'm using the same science that you're using, to describe these things. Yeah, it's not, nothing is impossible, but the numbers are just so staggering that it's impossible.
Well, when I talk about something as specific as the information, the DNA information theory, which Stephen Meyer is awesome. You should read him if you ever want to get into, why do Christians believe that the hand of God is evidence in the DNA chain? If you ever want to get into that, look at Stephen Meyer. I think there's obviously others, but he's one who I've read, and it's undeniable. Like, you get to a point where either there was a God who created it. Yeah, I know. There was a God who created it, or this is a simulation. This is just, it just makes no sense.
If you think about it, this is kind of a simulation.
Absolutely.
Everything's in flux. We're all, even though we're in this room and you and I are both supposedly physical, everything is in flux and we're actually moving constantly.
Well, there's more evidence to suggest that we're made up of space than matter. So the atomic theory. So when we're looking at how atoms behave. There's actually more empty space in them than there is solid matter. One of the favorite things I like talking about is that nothing ever touches, nothing ever actually comes into contact because the space in the atoms doesn't change. And it's interesting to think that even the Bible talks about this being a shadow of something. This whole world is really a shadow of something, or not necessarily a shadow of something. It's going to pass away. This is that's so annoying. This is not a infinite world. This wasn't created for eternity. It was created for temporality almost.
And yet you cannot create or destroy energy.
Well, that led me to that it's getting worse. Stop pointing it out. It led me to reincarnation. Einstein's theories led me to this idea that human life is just a form of energy that doesn't die and must keep coming back to the earth, reincarnated as animals.
Well, there's a distinction there. Let's be careful about when we use human life. Our physical bodies and the energy therein, I would distinguish that between that and our soul.
Well, this is the information that I was missing. I was missing this information because it was definitely a humanist worldview, so matter and energy. I was only dealing with matter and energy. I didn't want to deal with, and this is going back to that 20-year-old me, looking deep into this, trying to solve the mysteries of the world without accepting a divine hand. It was very clear that we were made of energy. And the way I think the Bible would explain this is that we're spiritual beings. We're actually spiritual.
In a physical body.
In a physical body. And was that the intention at the start? I think, if you go from a biblical worldview, humanity ruined what God had planned for the start and how things were supposed to be. It talks about even creation, all creation being, whether they be animals and plants, things like that, have actually fallen from what they were originally supposed to be. So when I looked at these Einstein theories, when I looked at energy, when I looked at thermodynamics, it made more sense to me that we must be going somewhere. This energy must be going somewhere, and indeed it is. Indeed, it is going somewhere.
It's recycled.
Well, it's definitely captured somewhere, and this ultimately made more sense to me from a heaven perspective and from a hell perspective than from a reincarnation to the earth perspective. That the idea that this energy that we have is transferred from simply one physical body to another physical body on the same plane made no sense to me.
No, it would be, obviously our energy within our physical bodies is just transferred to different things, but it doesn't then denote that so is our consciousness, and that's the difference between the Christian worldview or the Yahweh worldview and the humanist worldview. It's like, that energy, including your consciousness, gets transferred, whether that's to an animal, to any sentient being, essentially.
Well, for me at 20, realizing that every scientist who's looking into this, they must really be fighting, I found that there was no, and I think I've already said this in the cast, there was no universal theory that explained the moon. They have universal theories that explain the origin of the universe, the origin of Earth, the origin of certain things that they sort of look at it and they say, well, we have an answer for everything. We have an answer to this, and then there's a few things where they're like, look, we just don't have an answer for that. We don't have an answer for the origin of life, genuinely. I mean, they're not universal theories. They break down at certain points. Even Darwinistic evolution breaks down at, what's that place called? Not place.
Galapagos.
Nah, not Galapagos.
A place?
It's the explosion, the Cambrian explosion.
Okay.
The Cambrian explosion has a lot of issues with regards to Darwinistic evolution. So there's no universal theory for DNA, protein, enzyme creation, things like that, and the moon. There's no universal explanation for the moon. So we have a lot of people who come up with their own interpretations of where it must have come, and this is where I fell. I fell into the idea that, okay, it's clearly designed and made. So this is what I found this on a secular Secular meaning, obviously you don't know what secular means. You're in the wrong podcast. But this is the sort of scientific worldview, the non-divine scientific worldview with regards to the origin of the moon. It says the origin remains a topic of debate among scientists. The most widely accepted theory is that it formed, the moon, from debris left over from a Mars-sized object colliding with an early Earth, ejecting material into space that eventually coalesced to form the moon. This is known as the giant impact hypothesis. However, alternate theories such as capture, the moon formed elsewhere in the solar system as was captured by the Earth's gravity, or the co-formation, the moon formed at the same time as the Earth formed from the same material, are still being explored.
Man, whenever I hear that word hypothesis, it's called the what's that term that Graham Hancock always uses, which is that the comet hypothesis. What's got a specific word? Younger dryas.
The younger dryas.
But anyway, I always think to myself, could we get Graham Hancock on this podcast? That'd be so much fun.
Oh man, the guy loves talking. We'll get him. He loves it. But I will say this. There's a lot of people who associate Graham Hancock with fringe pseudoscience. So one of my early influences with regards to this kind of stuff was Eric von Daniken, and I read his Chariots of the Gods, and it just itched me right where I wanted to be itched. It tickled me, and I was like, this is what I'm talking about. This is the real hidden truths.
Hancock refers to that quite a lot.
Yeah, well, he loves it. It's one of his inspirations as well. Eric von Daniken is full on. He actually goes to places. One of the things I liked the most about his study was geoglyphs. He really does this big thing into geoglyphs. So things like the Nazca lines and other. There's a lot of geoglyphs all over South America and North America.
And the thing is that they've actually got some interesting stuff to say, because they're actually shifting from this archaeological paradigm and this putting us into this box, and
they're not shackled. They're not shackled.
They're not shackled. Yeah. Obviously, you can have truth intermingled with lack of understanding, and that's how I would probably describe guys like Graham Hancock. There's a lot of great stuff in there, but directed in the right way. But anyway, sorry.
Well, this is where I was. I was looking for the truth. I was looking for an explanation to these origins and to these things, and realizing there's something missing, and they all admit that. Graham Hancock, Eric von Daniken, David Icke, they all admit it. They're like, we're missing something.
Are we putting David Icke in the same category?
I don't know too much about David Icke. I really don't.
No offense to David Icke as a person, because I don't know him personally, but I don't know if we put him in the same sphere.
Look, I think the world puts them in the same sphere. Like the world puts fringe people, and I really don't know much about David Icke, so I could be misspeaking completely. But the reality is, when we talk about pseudoscience and alternate theories, everyone gets lumped into this sort of, well, they're wacky, they're crazy, and for me personally, they're just missing something. They're missing a piece of the puzzle, because depending on the data, the interpretation of data, you're going to come to different conclusions.
When Joe Rogan has David Icke on his podcast, which I don't think he has, then we can put him in the same category.
Okay, all right.
How's that?
Okay. So even from a secular perspective, they admit there's only theories that have issues when it comes to the formation of the moon, the origin of the moon. So let's talk about something. So they're the things, and I didn't really go into things like the craters. So just very quickly, the composition. So the moon is made of different materials than Earth, including a high concentration of aluminium, a lack of water and atmosphere. Obviously, the moon's crust is primarily composed of igneous rock, which its mantle and core are made of while its mantle and core are made of denser materials. So that's interesting that it's saying that the mantle is made of a certain thing, or rather the surface is made of a certain thing, and then that the core must be made of something denser. And it literally says made of something denser, and that's to account for the density of the moon versus its weight. Right.
So these are not your conclusions; these are the scientific conclusions.
Yeah, these are secular sources.
The official secular sources. Yeah.
So the moon's surface is covered in craters, suggesting that it's been bombarded by meteoroids and asteroids.
Which is self-evident. Yeah.
Evident, absolutely. The largest impact craters on the moon are multi-ring basins, which can be up to thousands of kilometers in diameter. So the craters on the moon are highly suspect. They're highly suspect because the depth at which the craters go to are almost uniform. They're almost uniform. They're within like a few thousand meters, which sounds like a lot of distance. But when you consider the depth of some of the meteoric impacts to Earth, how the size of an impact obviously indicates either a higher mass or a higher energy, and therefore a deeper penetration, whereas the moon has a very uniform depth to which all of its craters seem to indicate. People will say things as wild as, well, all of the craters go to the same depth. That's not true. But it is more true than not true. That is to say, we do see that there is something going on with regards to the density of the moon the deeper you go in.
So just on that, I haven't looked it up, not before we started today, but what's the deepest crater, do you know, in terms of distance?
It's the polar, hang on, it's the polar... the South Pole Aitken Basin, the South Pole Aitken Basin. So it's 2,500 kilometers from rim to rim. So I will try to get Jamie to put up a photo of it. It's enormous, Jason.
What about the depth?
So the depth is only a few kilometers. So when it comes to so I think like the max depth I think is 8 kilometers, right? Which is 8,000 meters, which is a deep amount. But let's say this is the moon, right? The ring is like this big. It's enormous. It's enormous.
And what to think what's actually hit these,
Well, this is the problem that I have found, and that other people discuss, is that similar impacts to Earth have very different characteristics with regards to depth. So if something this big hit the Earth, the ocean would be in it. Like we would look at it and we would see, because there are not subterranean, like subaquatic sort of impacts that we look at, and we can see, well, this was really big because it goes X deep, and also because of the crater diameter. What we see on the moon is that there seems to be a certain depth where it gets so dense, so hard, so resilient that you might have a diameter of, say, 50 meters, right? And then you'll have a diameter of like a kilometer, and they're the same depth. So something is happening when these impacts occur. There is no universal theory that explains these characteristics of impacts. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an astrobiologist. I'm not someone who knows this. But I know that the more and more you look into this, the more it makes sense that the moon has a very dense outer shell, something that can literally resist like megatons and megatons of impact energy. So like nuclear bombs could go off on it, it wouldn't scratch the surface, And then you come to the idea that we know that the moon rings like a bell. The idea that it must be made of some kind of porous, or not porous, like spongy in terms of its composition, like almost like bone material. So there's a lot of empty space in between the mantle. So this it's adding credence to the idea that we don't understand why craters don't go as deep as they should into the moon, and yet it doesn't explain the fact that the moon compositionally is much lighter than the Earth, much lighter, and yet much denser. So for us, scientifically, that doesn't make sense, that something is more dense.
That would make a bit of sense then, where you do hear rumours every now and again of scientists wanting to, mine the moon or mine its substances.
Well, helium-3 is up there. We know 100% helium-3 is up there, and helium-3 is an amazing potential energy source. One of the big theories that I got into was that the Americans, the Russians, and the Chinese are actually up there mining helium-3, and it's such a world-changing energy resource that they want to keep it quiet from the public. And this was back when I was looking into the fact that fossil fuels were running out. Oil's running out, gas is running out.
Fossil fuel is such a misnomer.
We're not even going to get into that.
Not today.
100% a misnomer, but even the idea that it's running out is not correct. The most energy efficient material that we could think of at this point in time is nuclear. So when it comes to energy efficiency, nuclear energy is more efficient. The only thing that I found that could compete with that was helium-3, and this is just some kid in his basement looking it up. And when you think about it, that would also make sense, that we haven't gone back to the moon for these reasons, that there was footage that was taken on the moon that showed man-made objects, like all of these things made sense if it's like, well, they're trying to hide facilities on the moon. I don't believe that now.
You just reminded me of something when you mentioned about nuclear. So in ancient Sanskrit, which is very similar to Tamil, but it's a older extinct language, the Bhagavad Gitas have their own detailed stories and writings of nuclear ships.
Yeah,
and these things are a lot of Indians, a lot of Hindus don't even know this stuff, because it's been there for thousands of years, and it's like either these have been made up, or there's something to it.
It starts with V. The flying things. It starts with V.
I can't quite remember the name of it. When I came across this a while back, I was just stunned. It's like, and just for our Christian listeners here, just to create a disclaimer.
Vimanas, sorry.
Yeah, just to create a disclaimer. There are to use the word secular when we're talking about other stories of how the world came to be, is secular is a new world. We're not talking about secular viewpoints. Secular viewpoints is there is no God. In all ancient cultures, there are stories about star people coming to Earth. Enki, there are different names for different things, and they have their own creation stories. And I think the best way I've had it described, with the late Michael Heiser, is essentially, as Christians, we have done a poor job of explaining, the God of the Bible and how He is the prime, and all these other stories are a description of events that, obviously over time, over thousands of years, truth, when it turns into myth, there are things that obviously get deleted and become obsolete, but they're still shrouded in events that actually happened in the beginning. But they are what we would call the alternative story, or they are what you would call the imposter story, which is, we come from Enki, we come from Marduk, as opposed to the prime, call it the Optimus Prime, the original,
the unmoved first mover, the
unmoved first mover. So there is something to I would say that there is something to all these ancient Veda stories. There is something to these ancient Veda stories. They are describing events potentially that did happen, but they are, the Bible is not supposed to describe all the different events that happened in the antediluvian world, nor is it trying to. But the other societies and civilizations that have come before do have their stories of other events that have happened, and while they're not necessarily important for the gospel, and they're not important to live a good Christian life, they are still there, that they can't be ignored in the wider scope of helping others understand that there are other forces at play. There are other spiritual forces in the background converging, and have converged in the past. And events that have happened on Earth, and just getting back to the whole nuclear thing and flying saucers. We have this, the greatest way I've ever heard it. We have this collective amnesia as a civilization. We think we're the pinnacle. We think we're the pinnacle.
Graham says humanity is a species with dementia.
Yeah, that's it. And I actually believe that too.
I think so there's two things I'll touch on about that. I 100% agree. We are reaching out for the answers. We're reaching out for the truth. And when we can't find it, often we make up our own truth, or we make up our own explanations. And I believe that that's the majority of human history. Jace, you touched on something that's so important that people forget. We consider ourselves the enlightened ones, technological ones, the ones who have risen above these, pagan, unwashed, believers and superstitious. For pretty much the whole of human history, we acknowledged
the secular worldview, I guess, believes that we've risen above everything. Yeah.
But all of humanity believed that there was a creator. And we're not talking about this idea of well, we've evolved past that. Some of the most intelligent people that we acknowledge as scientific and enlightened held to a creator, held to the idea of something that designed and put things the way they're supposed to be. There's, this is ultimately the reason I'm talking about a hollow moon theory and an alien spaceship moon theory is because that is your alternative. That is your alternative to God created the moon. That's your alternative. It's the only one that makes sense. Statistically, it's a lie that the moon fell into Earth's gravity well and was there. Statistically, it's a lie because of the distance from the sun. Statistically, it's a lie because of the perfectness of its orbit, the spherical nature of its orbit, the eccentricity of its rotation. It's just a lie. You have to believe a lie or make up an idea like, well, aliens put it there as a spaceship to inseminate the earth.
It's not even that you have to be able to lie. You have to, before even coming to the conclusion that there has to be an uncaused cause or a God-like figure that made everything, you have to ignore the basic science that we all rest upon, which is stats and mathematics, like pure maths, pure stats. You have to ignore it, and you have to ignore it so that, in my position, in my view, so that the inconvenience of an uncaused cause or a first prime mover, that becomes your conclusion. That's really what it comes down to. And just so we're on that as well, for any listeners out there, I don't mean this to disparage you. I don't mean this to, not at all. That's not what we're getting at here. But we've been given intellect as human beings, and we're required to use it. And when we're ignoring the conclusions that we come to, all using the same tools, and all agreeing that those tools work, that they're perfect, and all agreeing with the same calculations, and yet the conclusion that it comes to, we ignore it, whether that's us or whether that's you, we ignore it because we don't want to believe it. That's something very, very different.
We all have to admit there are preconceived ideas. There's preconceptions. There's precondition to when we try to formulate a conclusion. You can look at this data and come to a different conclusion, and that's okay, but you have to acknowledge that your preconception is different as well. A lot of this information that I'm discussing with regards to the moon, people are presupposing that there is no God, and so they're coming to certain conclusions. I entered into this presupposing there was no God. And then after opening the door and saying, okay, if I just crack the door open and say there may be a divine hand, everything made sense. Everything made way more sense. When it comes to the likelihood that a civilization created the moon as a spaceship to inseminate the earth with life, the lines of evidence that you would need to actually support that, not only do they completely not exist, but they would be evident everywhere. It would be extremely evident. And there are small lines of evidence with regards to some of our old civilization stories, whether it be from China or Asia, whether it be from India, whether it be from the Middle East, the Sumerians. When it comes to the lines of evidence that we have to support this theory, they're very few and far between. But then what if I look at the evidence of a divine creator? What if I open up the door to the lines of evidence that there is something that created this? What would I look for? And the evidence is just overwhelming. And we're not talking evidences from silence. We're not saying, well, it has to have been a creator, like a God of the Gaps thing. We look at, okay, is there purpose to this? We haven't even gotten to, and we won't get to, unfortunately, the moon and how it interacts with life on Earth, tidal cycles, the stabilization of Earth's rotation, the lunar cycles and how they assist mankind, protection from asteroids and other celestial matter, the influence on the Earth's atmosphere, the source for scientific study and enlightenment through observation of the moon, inspiration for culture and art. These types of things have not even been touched on in our discussion, and yet there seems to be an implication from the Bible that all these things are going to play a part. So we already touched on God's original, or at least from the Genesis accounts, God's original explanation for the purpose of the moon. It was for signs and seasons, for days and years, and it was a light to rule the night. Just that alone, when we look at the interaction between mankind and the moon, just that alone is a better explanation as to what the moon is for. Just that alone. Think about naval...
So in other words, it could very well be hollow, but so what? That's not what it's for.
Well, this is the thing. We're not talking about the composition of the moon or the scientific study of the moon. I'm convinced that some of this is to confound us. The Lord has put this away to confound us a little bit, but also to so there's warnings in the Bible, and this was something that I found was very interesting. It says in Deuteronomy, it says, "Unless thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the host of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God hath divided unto all nations under the whole heaven." So there's this warning and basically an implication that we might be tempted to start worshipping the sun and the moon and the stars, and has that not occurred? Do we not do that?
Many times.
And this was, obviously this is, 2,500 years ago, and clearly we would be inclined to do so. But here is this information that suggests we might end up doing that, and we have ended up doing that. There's no better example of how humanity needs a god or needs something to worship than how we've treated the celestial bodies. I mean, we look at ancient Rome, Greece, even the Bhagavad Gita. There's these implications that these represent godlike things.
Deities.
Deities, absolutely. And also something, just trying to wrap this up, when it comes to the consideration, okay, how best do we explain this moon? How best do we explain this body that makes no sense? Someone who's very interesting, so he's the senior scientist at the Planetary Science Institute, I believe in the States. His name's David Grinspoon. And I wanted to find someone who was not only secular, that is to say, didn't come from a biblical worldview, but was also scientifically acknowledged as currently, well, I wouldn't say enlightened, but in current circulation. So not some scientist from the 1800s, someone today from 2014. He said, "The moon is a world of its own, unique and enigmatic, shrouded in mystery and bathed in a pale ghostly light." And this is from his book, Earth in Human Hands, Shaping Our Planet's Future, again by David Grinspoon. The moon is a world of its own, unique and enigmatic, shrouded in mystery. I mean, we don't have the answers. If people want to take the position of, well, no, we have the answers to this. No, we don't have the answers to this. Such a simple thing as, okay, can we explain the moon naturalistically? If David Grinspoon could explain the moon naturalistically, this quote would take a very different shape, And I want to not put words in his mouth. I don't know the man, and I believe he does have a naturalistic theory as to how the moon came about, but not strong enough to really hold to it, to still acknowledge that there is mystery in the moon. For us, in Psalm 8, it says, 8:3, it says, "When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained." We have an answer. We have an answer with regards to where the moon came from. And for us, it's not full of mystery. There's I think about this boy, this 20-year-old kid who was looking for the answers and getting confused and going down all these rabbit trails about, okay, well, it must be literally, bro, lizards. It had to be lizards, and I would rather have believed that reptilian lizards or reptilian individuals of a extraterrestrial
royal
nature,
bloodline.
Well, yeah, of some kind of bloodline, created the moon, rather than accepting this obvious truth with a lot of evidence.
I'm surprised you didn't go down the line of it's made of cheese.
Well, that was the original name of the podcast, the hollow cheese moon theory.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. But then I thought
was that when I wasn't part of it?
You were always part of it. You gave me the idea. You said, "Is it made of cheese?" So the Psalms are very vocal about the moon. There is stuff in the scriptures that give us clear indications as to what the purpose of the moon was. And there's this other thing that I really want to touch on. So Psalm 19 is probably the best one that most Christians would know. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. When you look at the moon and the stars and you think, oh, what an accident this is, what a cosmic burp this is, it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's any culture that is not of a Western disposition or not of a Western influence will tell you you're crazy. When you look at the stars, it's obvious that God was at play.
Well, it's amazing you just bring that up. It seems to be this Western disposition that rejects, that essentially rejects any stories or narratives that tend to either be of a religious nature or a spiritual nature. But when we step outside of the West, it's literally steeped and soaked in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the collective West, just to put this into perspective, the collective West, like the pure collective West, is what, some 900 million people? Literally.
I've never looked into it, but yeah.
So we talk about, for example, I'm not going to go into this. This is for another time. It's like this.
What was that?
Switch the coffees.
Oh. You got your coffee, bro.
We just had a little grab me our little coffees there.
Yep.
Grab me our little coffees there on the side here. So the reason I mentioned that is like this idea of the minorities. The whole minorities debate that's around the world. Minorities. It's like no. So the collective white world is about 800 million people in a population of 8 to 9 billion people. So when I say the West is literally the vast majority of the white Western world, traditionally speaking. And yet we're the ones that are which is essentially where Heidelberg, Germany, we can't, the whole not enlightenment.
I used to live near Heidelberg.
Huh?
I used to live near Heidelberg.
Yeah, it's about Germany.
Coburg.
Germany.
Okay.
So this complete, on the one hand, this explosion of science came out of, from the 1500s onwards, came out of, you could say, the Western world, and yet it's undone itself in this whole secularism of now saying no, there are no God, there's no God. But the rest of the world, the other 8 billion people in the world, 7.5, 8 billion people, roughly speaking, don't hold me on the numbers, they're still going, no, we believe there's spirits, we believe there's things happening, we believe in some of our ancient creation stories. So what have we done? What have we done in this Western world? Was it just a push away from Christianity?
Yes. Yeah, they don't. So there's a quote, to let the divine foot in the door. They don't want to let it in. They've perverted it, bro. And this is the thing. This is how you get to ancient lizards, flying to the earth in the moon. This is how you get there, is by denying the obvious truth that someone put the moon there. Someone put it there for a purpose, And the Bible gives a very clear and obvious explanation to that. And I think the best explanation, and just look, I just want to wrap this up with this idea that I find in Scripture, all throughout Scripture. So Isaiah, Ezekiel, Joel, Revelation, the Gospels all talk about a time when the moon won't give its light anymore, and that for us, should be really concerning, because there's no naturalistic reason why the moon shouldn't give its light at all. In the past, there have been cultures who have looked at the moon and seen certain activities on the moon and thought the world was going to end. They've been terrified, and here we have
eclipses.
Even the blood moons. When it comes to what the Bible is saying, which again is, in my opinion, and I know yours, the best explanation as to how we have the solar system set up the way it is, how we have creation as the way it is. It says that there will come a time where the moon won't give its light anymore in several places, very specifically. And I think, if we're going to say it has the best explanation for the origin, I think it also has the best explanation for what could be perhaps the destruction of the moon. The Bible says that God will make a new heaven and a new earth, So I don't think this moon is going to be around forever, but I think as you study it and look more and more into it, it's a clear example of the handiwork of our divine creator, who is Christ, who is Jesus Christ, our Lord.
I know we're wrapping this up, But I just thought of another thing. There's been many times here in Melbourne on a clear, beautiful, clear night. I think I would think I was in McLeod actually here in Melbourne, and I'm looking out over the horizon and the moon. You could just put your hand out and touch the moon. It was so clear. How is it that I don't know enough about this? How is it that we're told that it's a 3-day journey on a rocket traveling 800 kilometers an hour?
Look,
do you think it's closer?
I really don't know. I'll be honest about this. I think the science behind the distance of the celestial bodies is pretty solid, but I think if you change a couple of parameters about them, it could be way off. You know, and I don't know. I haven't studied this. I haven't looked into it. It never became part of my study. But when it comes to the distance of the celestial bodies, I think we could certainly be very off, but not so much so that it would change fundamentally how we, because I mean, without getting into it, again, we are wrapping this up, but gravity is still very like,
no one knows what it is.
Even energy is
we
a
know
bit
how
weird.
it works.
Electricity is a bit weird.
But we don't know what it is.
But for me, it's a non-issue because I haven't looked into it, the distance of the moon. But something that is definitely an issue is explaining the moon, you know, our moon specifically. So for me, the best explanation is God. That's the best explanation. I think for a reasonable person, I haven't brought up any of the Christian scholars who have looked into this, and they are overwhelmingly right. They explain the likelihoods of these things, and it's like, again, the wind blowing through a salvage yard and building a jet. It's just ridiculous. So know this that you know, when the Bible presents the truth and it makes a better explanation than what secular science can with regards to the origins of certain things, it gives credence to its authority. It gives a better. You know, we don't have to just believe what the Bible says because it says a certain thing. We can look into the world, prove all things, and hold fast to that which is good. And so the Bible also says that there is going to come a time when you will be judged. You know, you'll be judged by God for the deeds of your life. And you have two choices. You can either try to be judged by your works, or you could be judged by Jesus Christ who died on the cross. And our desire is that you're judged by Jesus Christ. He made the moon. He clearly, obviously made the moon. Jesus was the creator of all things. He was the Word of God. And he has said that in his word that he can take on your sin to have communion with God once again. And so that's why that's the ultimate conclusion I came to, that the Bible was true. And through a very unique experience of studying the moon. It wasn't obviously the main thing that got me to a Christian worldview, but it certainly was one of them that made it clear. I mean, there's another pastor, Eddie, talks about looking at the precondition of life and the expansion of the universe and the Big Bang Theory from a brief history of time. That book, great book by Stephen Hawking, and he came to a clear understanding of God. There must be a God just out of that book, and it was very similar to me when I was studying the moon. You know, Enki, the Anunnaki, the lizard men, all of these things were, even in my heart, possibly were ridiculous. But when I had to consider, well, what if a God made it? What if there was a divine hand? It wasn't ridiculous. So so yeah, that was my hollow moon theory discussion.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's I think the most interesting thing I found out of this is I learned something new about you today.
You'll learn something new about me every day, Jace.
Every week. I didn't know that you were firmly entrenched in that world before you became a Christian. So, man,
the tinfoil hat days we'll talk about. We'll talk about, because they're going to be a lot of fuel for these podcasts. You know.
I mean, there are a lot of things, obviously, that since becoming Christians, I've, you know, especially in the last probably in the last 6 years, some things that I've come to know that other people would consider fringe. And yet when you step outside of that Western paradigm, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's literally everywhere. I think this is one of the things I want to tell our listeners is that we in the Western world, whether that's Canada, the United States, the UK, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, we are in the minority. We are in the minority as far as, you know, not so much our understanding of the world, just our rejection of anything else other than the physical. other than the physical world.
What's happening in the West? What's happening with truth in the West and objective truth? It's an interesting study.
So that's going to, what I'm saying here is actually going to be expanded upon as we go to our new subjects, to show people that a lot of the weird and wonderful things that we find in the world, I can just open up the Bible and go, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, it's there. Hey, look, it's there. And yet that's the prime. That's actually the story. So there'll be a lot of listeners who may get the opportunity to listen to us, and we don't know everything. Gee, we're on a journey too. Like we're
layman's.
We're layman's, big time layman's. But what we're not. When there are some conclusions that we come to, which is the gospel, which is scripture. That's our bedrock. But we don't know every part about archaeology, history, geography. We're taking, we will obviously link to sources about some of the things we discuss from time to time. For example, we mentioned Graham Hancock a few times. There's a lot of stuff. I don't agree with him on his, how the world came to be and millions of years old, and that Anunnaki made the world. But what I do see and agree with is that the Western world has basically shoved this stuff into away in a closet somewhere, and has been ignored. And I think that's sort of ties into a lot of things we're going to be talking about, but we're from a biblical worldview. Yeah.
And we know Christians shy away from some of this stuff, and we definitely want to explore it. We want to engage in it, and most importantly, provide an example that the Word of God gives us answers. Answers that sometimes are unexpected. But yeah, close us off, brother, and we'll wrap this one up.
Okay, is this where I do my key? Actually, I'm going to get you to do it this time. You can close off today.
You've been listening to.
It's going to be a deeper voice.
You've been listening to Fringe Frequencies.
I don't have a low enough voice. You've been listening to another version of Fringe Frequencies.
Have a lovely time over Easter, over this Passover time. And yeah, we didn't even get into it.
We didn't even get into it.
We will one
day. Do we have?
No, we don't. No.
Do we have 2 minutes? Do we have
no, because we can't do this for 2 minutes.
We can't.
No, we can't.
Can we do a short version? No. Okay. That's not, we'll do it. We'll do it next week.
God bless.
Yeah.
Take care.
Take it easy.
Thank you. Thank you.